Hello everyone, this is your educator Priyanka Thakur teaching you life sciences and welcome you all on our YouTube channel Gurmantra Shiksha Ka Granth. So, how's your preparation going on? Not so good, not so bad like that, no? But I want you to say my preparation is going damn good. Okay, I hope you are saying this right now. I'll be glad to know this. In previous section, we completed about the organ that are involved in respiratory system, and we also got to know about the mechanism of respiration. In this section, we are going to know about the exchange of gases, Bohr effect, Haldane effect, important respiratory states, and along with this, we will be covering control of respiration. So let's start with our today's topic. I'll be a bit fast. If you want, you can slow down the video. Okay? Maybe you are gonna be comfortable with my speed. Maybe and may not be. Let's start it. Let's talk about exchange of gases. It's carbon dioxide and oxygen. See, what is the purpose of breathing? The purpose of breathing is to provide a continuous supply of oxygen and the continuous removal of carbon dioxide. When we talk about exchange of gases, we will see like pulmonary circulation, we will see pulmonary gaseous exchange and systemic gases exchange. And the gaseous exchange largely depends upon the partial pressure of oxygen and carbon dioxide. So, what is the partial pressure? Partial pressure is the pressure of a gas that it exert in a mixture of gases. This is what we call partial pressure of oxygen. And gases exchange occur by the process of diffusion. It means gases are going to be diffused down their concentration gradient, isn't it? Or is it? Is it? It is, ma'am. Yes. Okay. So the exchange of gases, how can we talk about them? See, exchange of gases and carbon dioxide, it is mainly governed by two gases laws. One is Dalton's law, other one is Henry laws. So what is Dalton's law? There's a Dalton law of partial pressure. This law states that in a mixture of gases, each gas will exert a pressure, and that pressure exerted by that particular gas in the mixture of gases is known as its partial pressure, and that partial pressure is equal to the pressure the gas would exert if it was the only gas present. Okay, so total pressure of mixture is sum of the partial pressure of all the gases present. You understand what is partial pressure? Partial pressure is the pressure of an individual gas that it exert in the mixture of gases. Okay, but partial pressure will be equal to what? If gas is present, like it would be the only gas present, then it will be exerting the same pressure as it will exert in the mixture of gases. So partial pressure is equal to the pressure of the gas it would exert if it was the only gas present. Second one comes the Henry law. This law says that the quantity of gas that will dissolve in a liquid, that quantity will be proportional to partial pressure of the gas and the solubility of gas. Solubility of gas remains constant if the temperature is constant, and in the blood temperature is almost constant. It is not that it doesn't vary that much. So concentration of a gas dissolved in a fluid like plasma, it will be directly proportional to the partial pressure in the gas mixture. Okay, it directly depends on its partial pressure in the gas mixture. Okay, so these are the two laws, Dalton law and Henry law. You must know about the atmospheric pressure at the sea level. At the sea level, atmospheric pressure is 760 mm Hg. I have shown this thing in my previous lecture. So what is the concentration of oxygen in the atmosphere? Is 21% by volume. So you have to multiply 760 into 0.21. You will get 160 mm Hg partial. This is the partial pressure of oxygen in the atmospheric pressure. Okay. So 160 or 159 mm Hg is the partial pressure of oxygen in the atmosphere. And that's how you can also calculate the partial pressure of nitrogen and carbon dioxide. You know that 78% of there is 78% of nitrogen in the atmosphere. So to calculate the nitrogen at partial pressure, you have to do what? You can multiply 0.78 into 760. You will get approximately 593 mmHg. Similarly, you will get to 0.3 or 0.2 mmHg for carbon dioxide, partial pressure of carbon dioxide. Okay. So we will here now talk about pulmonary circulation and systemic circulation. Let me show you. This is the atmospheric pressure 159 mm Hg, approximately 160. Partial pressure of carbon dioxide 0.3 mm Hg. This is the carbon dioxide exhale. This is a diagram I have taken from the Pathfinder, but this naming is wrong. It will be carbon dioxide, and in the partial pressure of carbon dioxide will not be 105 mm Hg. It will be 40 mm Hg. In alveoli, the partial pressure of oxygen you will read 100 and 104 and 105. Okay, but it will be 100 or more than 100. 105 mm Hg. Okay, and the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is 40 mm Hg. So this one is a thing which is wrong on your Pathfinder. Okay, so fine, you understand it. So what happens during pulmonary gas exchange? I will talk about pulmonary gas exchange first. This is the pulmonary artery that is bringing the deoxygenated blood. So partial pressure of carbon dioxide is 46 mm Hg in this artery, and partial pressure of oxygen is lower, that is 40 mm Hg. This is the alveoli. The partial pressure of alveoli is almost 100 to 104 mm Hg, but partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the alveoli is lesser, which is 40 mm Hg. Now we know that carbon dioxide partial pressure in this capillary will be 46 mm Hg. So 46 mm Hg carbon dioxide will diffuse to the 40 mm Hg carbon dioxide, okay, from down the concentration gradient. And here the partial pressure of oxygen is more in alveoli, so oxygen will be diffused into the capillaries. Now it will move through the vein to the heart. So this is the pulmonary gas exchange. Let's talk about systemic gas exchange now. So now pulmonary vein from the lung is bringing your oxygenated blood, in which partial pressure of oxygen is 104, more than 100, and partial pressure of carbon dioxide is 40. Then this 100 partial pressure of oxygen will move into the left ventricle, and from this it will go into the body. So arteries will have 100 to 104 mm Hg of oxygen partial pressure, and body will have only 40 mm Hg of oxygen partial pressure. So the oxygen will move from these arteries to the body tissue, but body tissue will have 46 mm Hg of partial pressure of carbon dioxide, while blood, these arteries have only what? This the capillary, which will be responsible for exchange of these gases, those capillary will have only 40 mm Hg partial pressure of carbon dioxide. 46 is more in the tissue. So from tissue, carbon dioxide will diffuse into the capillaries, which then will be taken by vena into the vena cava, and then to right atrium, right ventricle, and from right ventricle through pulmonary artery, it will again reach to the lungs. That's how exchange of gases will take place. Okay, I hope this thing is clear to you now and you are not confused with anything. Remember, the amount of oxygen transferred to the cell and amount of carbon dioxide carried away from the cell, they both depends on the rate of cellular metabolism. Remember this thing. Let's talk about transport of oxygen now. Okay, how the transport of oxygen and carbon dioxide takes place. See, oxygen, it doesn't dissolve completely in the water, so you will see only 1 to 2%, like 1.5% of inhaled oxygen will dissolve in the plasma, and rest of all oxygen will be transported by hemoglobin in the bound state. It will form oxyhemoglobin. Okay, so each 100 ml of oxygenated blood, in each 100 ml of oxygenated blood, you will see it will contain almost 20 ml of gaseous oxygen. Okay, 100 ml of oxygenated blood will contain almost only 20 ml of gaseous oxygen, right? So hemoglobin, when we talk about hemoglobin, it is a tetrameric protein. It is having quaternary structure, allosteric conjugated protein. It has 4 subunits, and each of its subunit will bind to heme prosthetic group, which is an iron porphyrin derivative. This hemoglobin is found in all the vertebrates but not in the Arctic fish. To each subunit, 1 oxygen will bind. So hemoglobin bind to 4 oxygen and will form oxyhemoglobin. Right? You understand it? Okay, different hemoglobin are expressed during different development stages of human life. When you talk about embryonic stage, which is about 8 weeks, you will see epsilon 2, epsilon 2. Okay, this is Gover type 1 hemoglobin. During fetal stage, like from 3 to 9 months, you will see alpha 2, gamma 2. This is what we call hemoglobin F. Fine. And then come adult, alpha 2, beta 2, and alpha 2, delta 2. Mostly you see alpha 2 beta 2. This is HbA1. Alpha 2 delta 2 is HbA2. Okay, so the transfer of oxygen, it mainly depends upon the partial pressure of oxygen. Okay, so partial pressure of oxygen is the most important factor that will determine how much oxygen will bind to hemoglobin. See, if the hemoglobin, which is not having any oxygen, it is completely saturated by oxygen, then such a hemoglobin is called saturated hemoglobin. If it is not completely it is not containing like all the subunit of hemoglobin are not filled up by oxygen, it means this is not completely saturated hemoglobin. Okay, so when we draw the curve again, like for oxygen partial pressure and hemoglobin saturation, we get a saturation, we get a sigmoid S-shaped curve. And now we know that the main factor that is going to influence this curve is the partial pressure of oxygen. Definitely along with the partial pressure of oxygens, there are some factors that will determine the shift of this curve. Okay, let's talk about pH first. pH, if pH is lowering, it means hydrogen ion concentration is increasing, and it will cause a decrease in the affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen, and this curve will shift to right. Okay, lower the pH, more are the hydrogen ion. Hydrogen ion will bind to the globin of hemoglobin, and they will cause some structural change in the hemoglobin, and the hemoglobin will not have enough affinity for oxygen now. So that's why this curve will shift to right. And if this pH will increase, it means hydrogen ion concentration is less. This curve will shift to left. Let's talk about partial pressure of carbon dioxide now. See, carbon dioxide can also bind to hemoglobin. As fast as carbon dioxide enters the blood, it will be converted into carbonic acid with the help of carbonic anhydrase enzyme, and those carbonic acids are they then get converted into bicarbonates and hydrogen ion. So carbon dioxide, increased carbon dioxide concentration decreases the pH by adding more and more hydrogen ion. So again, increased pH, decreased pH means more hydrogen ion. More hydrogen ion means structural change in the hemoglobin that will reduce the affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen. That's why more oxygen can, more partial pressure of carbon dioxide can lower the pH, and it will result in the shift of a curve towards right. Next come your 2,3-DPG, which is 2,3-diphosphoglycerate or 2,3-bisphosphoglycerate. It is a highly charged ion. Okay, if it is present in abundant amount, then it will bind to the beta globin chain of hemoglobin, and then it will reduce the oxygen affinity of hemoglobin and shift the entire oxygen dissociation curve to the right. It exerts its effect on oxygen affinity of hemoglobin by binding to deoxyhemoglobin but not to oxyhemoglobin. Okay, the greater the level of bisphosphoglyceric acid, the more oxygen is unloaded from hemoglobin. Fine. And let me also tell you about fetal hemoglobin, like HbF. Fetal hemoglobin Hb have more affinity for oxygen. That's why the blood is drawn from mother to the fetus. And if this now let's talk about, if temperature is lesser, partial pressure of carbon dioxide is lesser, 2,3-DPG is lesser, hydrogen ion lesser, means pH is more, then oxygen the dissociation curve will shift to the where it will shift to left. But if temperature is more, partial pressure of carbon dioxide is more, 2,3-DPG is more, pH is lesser, hydrogen ion concentration is more, then this shift and then this curve will shift to the right. Hope everything is clear to you now in this image. Let's talk about Bohr effect now. I just told you about the effect of pH on oxygen. So this Bohr effect was described by Christian Bohr, and the effect of pH on the affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen is what we call Bohr effect. You can read all these things. Okay, if you don't get anything, you can ask me. I'm telling you in brief that the effect, like I'm telling you, lowering of pH can cause the oxygen affinity of the hemoglobin to decrease, and the shifts the curve to the right. The effect of pH on the oxygen affinity of hemoglobin is known as Bohr effect. And then let me tell you about transport of carbon dioxide. Unlike like oxygen, it will move down its concentration gradient but unlike oxygen, it can dissolve easily in the plasma as compared to oxygen. So 7% of carbon dioxide is transported through plasma. 23 to 25% is transported in the form of carbaminohemoglobin. Okay, carbon dioxide will bind to hemoglobin reversibly and form the carbaminohemoglobin, and rest of the plasma is transported in the form of bicarbonates ion, and bicarbonates ion are formed more in the RBC and lesser in the plasma. Okay, these how these carbon dioxide bicarbonates are formed. See, carbon dioxide can bind to hydrogen, water, in the presence of carbonic anhydrase. Carbonic anhydrase is more in the RBC as compared to the plasma. Okay, so carbon dioxide plus water, it will immediately change in the carbonic acid. This carbonic acid then dissociate and form protons and bicarbonates. These protons, if they increases, okay, if carbon dioxide increases, these protons will increase and they will dissociate hemoglobin from oxygen. But as long as partial pressure of oxygen increases, this hemoglobin HHB will, this hydrogen will be removed and hemoglobin will bind to oxygen. But remember, here is bicarbonates now. These bicarbonates can diffuse from the RBC cell membrane toward the blood plasma because the concentration of a bicarbonate is more in the RBC and lesser in the plasma. But to balance the charge, chloride ion from the plasma will move into the RBC. This is what we call chloride shift. And again, let me tell you, the amount of carbon dioxide that can be transported in the blood, it will be influenced by the percentage saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen. The lower the amount of oxyhemoglobin, the higher the carbon dioxide carrying capacity of blood. And now in the, short, I want to tell you that the effect of oxygen on the hemoglobin affinity of carbon dioxide or transport of carbon dioxide is known as Haldane effect, and it was described by Scott Haldane. Oxygenation of blood, see, the oxygen that is adding on the binding to the hemoglobin is not an oxidation process, it is an oxygenation process. So oxygenation of blood in the lungs displaces carbon dioxide from the hemoglobin, which increases the removal of carbon dioxide, and this property is what we call Haldane effect. Okay, rest of the things you can study. If you are finding any confusion, you can ask me, but I have given you a brief idea. Let's talk about the control of respiration now. Okay, how the respiration is being controlled. But before that, let me tell you about some important respiratory states. Eupnea means normal breathing. Dyspnea means you are finding any difficulty during breathing. Apnea means the absence of breathing. Hypopnea means increased volume of increased breathing, you can say. Hypoxia means there is lesser amount of oxygen. I mean, your body is not getting enough oxygen that is required to perform the metabolism. Okay, cyanosis means when your mucous membrane, your body, like your skin, your periphery part, like your hands, feet, become bluish due to the low oxygen level in the red blood cells or problem getting oxygenated blood to your body. This is what we call cyanosis. Then comes hypercapnia, or is also known as hypercapnia. When there is too much carbon dioxide in the bloodstream, this is what we call hypercapnia, but if it is low, it is known as hypocapnia. Okay, let's talk about control of respiration now. How control of respiration takes place. Breathing is a continuous process, and we know that, and there is a cyclic pattern to sustain life processes. We have the ability to regulate the breathing rhythm to suit the demand of our body. Okay, and it is regulated by the respiratory center, which are present in the medulla and pons. Medulla have two center, ventral respiratory center and dorsal respiratory center. Pons have again pneumotaxic center and apneustic center. Let's talk about your medullary rhythmic respiratory center. First one is dorsal respiratory center. So this dorsal respiratory group, it consists of mostly inspiratory neurons. So when inspiratory neurons of dorsal respiratory group fire, okay, they stimulate, the inspiration takes place. And when this firing stops, their stimulus stops, expiration takes place. So nerve impulses which are generated in these inspiratory neurons, these impulses will establish a basic rhythm of breathing. During quiet breathing, inspiration lasts for about 2 seconds and expiration lasts for about 3 seconds. And at the end of 2 seconds, these inspiratory neurons become inactive and nerve impulses ceases. This ventral respiratory group contains of both inspiratory and expiratory neurons. Okay, so when ventral respiratory system, this what will it do? It works during forceful breathing. It send nerve impulses from inspiratory neuron, and those will activate those inspiratory neuron then activate expiratory neuron, and impulses from expiratory neuron will cause contraction of internal intercostal and abdominal muscles, and this will decrease when your internal intercostal and abdominal muscle decreases, the thoracic cavity size decreases from the normal size, and that's why there is forceful expulsion. So your dorsal respiratory group mostly consists of inspiratory neurons, and they are mainly going to act on the external intercostal muscles and your diaphragm, while ventral respiratory group works doing forcible expulsion, and they are going to work on internal intercostal muscle and abdominal muscles. That will cause the decrease in the thoracic cavity, and the volume inside the cavity will ultimately increase, and there will be a forcible expulsion. But although these medullary rhythmic center control the basic rhythm of respiration, there are other center in the brain stem that are going to help the they are going to help to coordinate the inspiration and expiration. These are pneumotaxic center and apneustic center. Pneumotaxic centers, these are found in the upper pons. What they will do? They are going to turn off the inspiratory neurons of dorsal respiratory system. Okay, and these pneumotaxic, if this pneumotaxic area is more fast, they will immediately turn off the inspiratory neuron, and you will breathe on a faster rate, like breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. It means your inspiration is for short time. Okay, so your pneumotaxic center sends signals to dorsal respiratory group. It actually inactivate its inspiratory neuron and shorten the inspiration, while this ventral respiratory group, what it will do, not ventral inspiratory group, but this apneustic group work opposite to that of pneumotaxic center. Apneustic center is going to increase the inspiration by preventing the inhibition of inspiratory neurons. Understand? Fine. The respiratory center, now we know they can control the rate and depth of the breathing, but their activity is further influenced by the chemoreceptors. So what are chemoreceptors? These chemoreceptors are sensitive to pH, partial pressure of carbon dioxide and partial pressure of oxygen. There are main two types of chemoreceptors, central chemoreceptors, and other one are peripheral chemoreceptor. Partial pressure of carbon dioxide mainly influence the central chemoreceptors. Let me tell you how the things will happen. Peripheral, central chemoreceptor, they are mainly present in the medullary region, and peripheral chemoreceptor, they mainly include optic bodies around the optic arc and carotid bodies around the carotid artery, and not optic arc is optic artery. Let's talk about central chemoreceptor. They are sensitive to change in the pH of the cerebrospinal fluid. Okay. If the partial pressure of cerebrospinal partial pressure of carbon dioxide in cerebrospinal fluid is increases, then there will be an increase in the partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the arteries as well. When the partial pressure of arteries carbon dioxide in arteries increases, this carbon dioxide will can form carbonic acid with the help of your carbonic anhydrase, and soon this carbonic acid dissociate into what your protons and bicarbonates, and increased protons will increase the pH, will decrease the pH or increase the hydrogen ion concentration. So the fall in the pH occur because the carbon dioxide can combine with water to form carbonic acid which is a weak acid, and low pH means increased hydrogen ion concentration. It can stimulate the central chemoreceptor to increase the breathing, because now they know that there is enough carbon dioxide and oxygen is lacking. So they will stimulate the breathing. So thus central chemoreceptor do not monitor carbon dioxide itself. They are sensitive to changes in the carbon dioxide induced hydrogen ion concentration in the brain extracellular fluid that bathes them. Okay. Oxygen, in contrast, if you are talking about oxygen, it does not have any significant effect on the respiratory center of the brain in controlling respiration. In fact, it can it can act on the peripheral chemoreceptor to a lesser extent. So most of the chemoreceptors, peripheral chemoreceptors, they are going to respond. They are mainly present in the carotid bodies. Okay, a few in the optic bodies. These receptors mainly detect the changes in the oxygen in the blood, although they also respond to lesser extent to changes in the carbon dioxide and hydrogen ion concentration. When oxygen concentration in the arterial blood falls below normal, these chemo receptor becomes strongly stimulated. If carbon dioxide become rises and hydrogen ion concentration rises, then also they can be activated. But main function of controlling a respiration along with the respiratory like respiratory center is performed by central chemoreceptor and to a lesser extent from peripheral chemoreceptors. Okay, so peripheral chemoreceptors, they mainly detect oxygen and can also detect carbon dioxide, but most of the carbon dioxide is detected by central chemoreceptors. I hope everything is clear to you now. You will also study about disorders of respiratory system, but I hope you must have heard about them, like chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, also known as COPD, emphysema, asthma, bronchitis, pneumonia, tuberculosis. These are the very basic diseases, so you should be knowing about all these diseases. That's all for today. If you want to take the subscription of an academy for preparation of your NET JRF, you can see the detail of paid classes on your screen. You can get a 10% off from this particular fee by using the referral code of Neha Taneja ma'am, which is Neha. You can follow ma'am on an academy. She is going to teach you for CSIR net. Okay, CSIR net. But along with this, you know that we are also teaching you. So do subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to get the notification. And if you want to join us anywhere else, you can check out the description box here. There you will get the links on a single click. You will be there with us. That's all for today. Take care. Bye bye.